If you touch the throw, you got to go. Hello, my name is Will, and this is Exploding Golf Cart, the only podcast in the world celebrating films where golf carts explode. Now, there are few genres that are as dangerous to navigate as the spoof movie. For every Airplane or Shaun of the Dead, there's a dozen Meet the Spartans or Scary Movie 5s. In fact, the hits to misses ratio has got so bad that whenever you have reason to watch another entry in this genre, it feels a bit like you're playing Russian roulette. And after watching rom-com spoof date movie, you may actively welcome a bullet to the head. So on this show, we're taking a rather nervous look at Undercover Brother, which seeks to poke fun at the blaxsploitation and spy film genres. And talking of experiences which you fear are going to turn into a bad joke, my guest today, once again, is Nick Rehak from French Toast Sunday. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing very well, Will. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well given the circumstances that we are living in as a global population at the moment. But probably best we don't go down that particularly dark rabbit hole. So Exploding Golf Cart, I like to think, is a respite from all that is going on in the world. And naturally, because of the theme of this particular podcast, I wanted to ask you, as my guest on this show, what is your relationship with golf and films that feature or films that are about golf?
I mean, outside of Happy Gilmore and Caddyshack, I got nothing. I don't watch golf. I can appreciate people that do. I understand, it's a joy for them. They track the stats, they track the guys and pars and all that. I mean, I'll play mini golf. Don't get me wrong. I will, crush a couple holes of mini golf with, the statues and plaster casts and stuff. But I genuinely don't see the appeal. I don't know what's so great about it. I love watching them ride the carts. I think the hats are cool, but that's about it.
So you're sort of in that camp of people who consider golf basically a way of spoiling a nice walk.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, what's the sense of knocking a ball around and chasing after it when you can be bird watching, or you could just, enjoy the day or sit down and take a couple breaths of, fresh air coming off of some good looking trees. Like I don't know, just anything's better to me. Anything's better than that. And they're expensive. You ever been to the store and look how expensive golf clubs are? It's not cheap.
It's a phenomenally expensive game, both in terms of the equipment and just getting some time out on the course. It's a game that makes no pretense about wanting to keep out the hoi polloi.
Yeah, and it feels like an old man's club. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're getting some younger blood in there with your Jordan Spieths and things, but I just don't get it. I feel like it's going to die off, and we're going to one day wonder, like, hey, what was this sport? We're going to find a club and go, oh, let's reinvent it. And it's like, no, I'd rather see Tiger on a mini golf course than I would a bunch of fields in Georgia.
Well, maybe that is a future that awaits us, perhaps not very far from now. But luckily for you, Nick, the film that we're talking about today, it does feature some golf, but is not strictly about golf. So I think you've had a bit of a lucky break on this particular episode of Exploding Golf Carts. So I think it's time we teed off our discussion of Undercover Brother. So while Nick and I head over to the first hole, why don't you take a listen to the trailer?
He's cool under pressure and always in control. He's one brother who works undercover.
Whoa, we won't fall. It ain't no thing.
But when a dangerous criminal needs to be stopped,
Get me undercover, brother.
he's the one to call.
Welcome to the Brotherhood.
Blackness confirmed. You got sold.
His mission to infiltrate the enemy.
It's gonna be a very dangerous assignment.
You're gonna have to think and act just like an uptight white man with a country club membership.
May I help you?
Jackson. Anton Jackson. And no, I'm not one of the Jackson 5.
It's time to unleash our secret weapon.
Wow, fine.
I call it Black Man's Kryptonite.
What the hell?
Penelope Snow, would you like to be my friend? What are you doing with that girl?
Nothing relaxes a brother after a hard day of going undercover like a little piece of...
Now, he taking it to the streets and taking it to the sheets.
What happened to you? He had sex with a white girl, that's what.
So, Undercover Brother is set in a world where African American pop culture has been in decline since the 1980s. This is all due to the efforts of a mysterious figure known only as the Man. The plot hinges on General Bootwell, a black American general who's expected to stand for president. But when he suddenly renounces politics to open a fried chicken franchise, Undercover Brother detects the sinister, unseen work of the Man. The titular hero teams up with a secret organisation called the Brotherhood to stop the Man's plot against Black America. In the cast we have Eddie Griffin, Billy D. Williams, Dave Chapelle, Denise Richards and Doogie Howser himself, Neil Patrick Harris. Undercover Brother came out in 2002. It has a 5.8 rating on IMDb and a 64% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So with all that out the way, let's find out what my guest thought. So Nick, what did you make of Undercover Brother?
It was fun. It's really like kind of campy, goofy fun. I saw this once before, and when you brought the opportunity for me to see it again, I'm like, good. You know what? I haven't seen it in a while. This gives me a reason, and I don't remember anything that happened. I remembered, obviously, because I just saw it, but I thought, like, oh, this is going to be in here. It's not going to be in there, and it's just completely the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. A lot more cheesy, and I feel at times it felt a little bit like the Naked Gun films or like an Airplane kind of thing.
That's not a bad thing, though, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. I just wasn't expecting that level of like goofy, absurd comedy. And it really towed that line of the goofy, absurd and like exploitation film, which I thought was kind of fun. But then obviously a couple years later, Black Dynamite comes out and just completely capitalizes and becomes like the comedy exploitation film. So it's really hard to think of this movie and not immediately think of Black Dynamite, but even though this one did come out first, so I wonder if this one kind of paved the way for films like Black Dynamite or Pootie Tang or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very natural reference point, Black Dynamite, if you watch this film, because I actually think there's quite a large chunk of the plot of Undercover Brother is very similar to the plot that you get in Black Dynamite. So, you know, essentially this whole idea of Black Americans being drugged through something that they commonly eat, or in Black Dynamite, it's something that they commonly drink with the legendary Anaconda malt liquor. By poisoning that to reduce the African Americans sort of male member size. But yeah, I mean, coming back to Undercover Brother, though, I mean, I really enjoyed this. I thought that it had a really good blend of visual gags. It also has some slapsticky elements, I guess, but alongside that, it also has like some sharper satirical content in there. And this film, kind of going into it, I just assumed that it was going to be more at the broader end of the spectrum, but actually I was really pleasantly surprised by just how much cutting wit that there was in there. Good example of that is early on in the film there's quite a good gag around O.J. Simpson, which I thought was very funny, which really made me laugh. And you know, I wasn't really expecting that kind of sharper end of humour here, so I thought that this film covered a lot of comedic bases.
And what's interesting, too, is a lot of it still relevant today. Like, a lot of these jokes still land really well, and I think that adds to its longevity. And, yeah, some of it doesn't hit, and some of it's like, oh, you can't really do that in today's culture. But overall, like, it still makes itself relevant, even though it's, 18 years later?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because as I was watching this film, I was thinking this is nearly 20 years old, and you know, most of the jokes still land really well. And you know, a little while back I rewatched a couple of the Austin Powers movies, and those films I don't think have dated very well at all. I mean, I enjoyed them at the time. But when I went back and rewatched them, I was like, man, this has not aged well. What? I was clearly a very different person when the first time round I watched these movies. Whereas this film, as I was saying, it's 20 years old, and most of the jokes still land. And I think that's testament to some quality joke writing.
Yeah, because you can have something like an Airplane or Blazing Saddles where you have context clues of the time when it came out, so you can understand some of the jokes and references they make, and some of it is just timeless comedy. But then you have stuff like this, or you have, like you mentioned earlier, the scary movie franchises or the blank movie where a lot of it's like pop culture at the time. So it becomes this weird time capsule that, unless you were there at that moment, it's not really funny. And then even like you, when you're looking back on it kind of nostalgic, it's like, oh, okay. You don't laugh so much as just acknowledge, oh, okay, that's a joke. Or, oh, yeah, that was the thing. I can't believe. So,
yeah. So how well do you think this film did in sending up the espionage and blaxploitation genres?
I think it did really well. I haven't delved as deep into blaxploitation as I would have liked to. But as far as the espionage, I recently watched all of the Pierce Brosnan and James Bond films for a Lambcast. So having that fresh in my mind and then seeing this, like, it really worked. And I've noticed it's nice to see a spy type film where there's a real team going. There's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle rather than just have like somebody they report to and a gadget person. There's all different types of people. Like, I love Dave Chappelle's The Conspiracy Brother, and really like all he does is just these absurd conspiracies. You have the chief, you have smart brother, sister girl, like you have all these different pieces, and they all do something. They're not just there for the, I mean, Conspiracy Brother is just there for the jokes, but everybody has a little something that they can contribute, and even then their parts are a bit of a send up. So it's nice to see all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably this is actually more of an espionage spoof than it is a blaxploitation spoof. I think if you want a blaxploitation spoof, I think Black Dynamite is the film that absolutely has like nailed that particular kind of genre. But I think I think this film is kind of dressed in that blaxploitation dressing, but really, I think a lot of the gags, a lot of the humor, a lot of the plot is essentially about spoofing the espionage genre.
Absolutely. And like we said, they absolutely nail it. And it just works in a weird way. And you know what's funny? The more I talk about it, the more I kind of like it more than what I initially said at the beginning of this podcast. Like, it works. And it shouldn't. It shouldn't work. It should be terrible and lambasted. But in some parts are. Like, I think Chris Kattan is a real weak point, unfortunately, because I do like Chris Kattan. But it's just, I don't know, it just works. It just works.
What then for you were the standout moments?
I think the standout moment is just Eddie Griffin. I think he's obviously, anytime he's on the screen, he just owns it. He's funny. He's obviously charismatic in the role. But I love Dave Chapelle as well. I mean, anything he does, I'm a fan of. So to see him as Conspiracy Brother was great. It's interesting, too, to see him. And I feel like anytime he's done a film role, he's always like this hyper-extended version of himself. He's not really grounded and down to earth. And it's funny, too, because he talks about being, the stereotypical character in like a rom-com kind of thing. And then he later on in his career became that stereotypical character in a rom-com when he was in You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. So I thought that was like a weird thing to mention. But yeah, I just, the cast as a whole is great. Like, even Denise Richards, like, she does really well in this film, unlike other films that she's been in. But I think we could have had a better villain. Like, I wish we would have had a better reveal of who the man was. Chris Kattan does a lot of the heavy lifting on the villain side, but it just comes off as like almost childish, like kind of middle school level or secondary school level, like humor. And I'm like, I want something a little more. Like, if that would have been stronger and they would have had some real stakes at hand, I think this could have been a much better received film than what it was.
Yeah, he gets. I think you hit the nail on the head. He's sort of the kind of gags and jokes that he get are as very much that sort of, I guess we'd call it sixth form of humour here in the UK. He doesn't get any of the kind of sharper gags that some of the other characters get. But I think there were a lot of for me, there were a lot of sort of standout scenes in this film. Again, I agree with you. I thought that Denise Richards, she was really good in this film. Like, her character, she plays what's her character called? It's like White
White She-Devil.
White She-Devil, yeah. Like, so she plays White She-Devil or as one of the other characters describes her in this film. She's the sort of black man's kryptonite because she's this sort of incredibly attractive, blonde woman who just sort of sends undercover brother into a sort of a dribbling fool of kind of lust, and then there was a scene right at the end of this movie where I won't necessarily spoil all the lines, but it was right near the end of this movie where somebody says the line, behind every black man, and then the kind of like a group of everyone sort of chimes in with a kind of like behind every black man there's probable cause, or something, some other kind of and I thought a lot of those lines there were very sharp, and that was a good that was a sort of very well written scene.
Yeah, that killed me, and that's one of those things where the jokes, it's still relevant today, and like you said, it makes it sharp and it makes it pointed, and it's also kind of a shame that those jokes are still relevant and still land. It's a shame that it's like, oh, actually, it's gotten better. Like, no, no, it hasn't, especially here in the States.
But then there was another really good joke that I enjoyed, which was at the completely other end of the spectrum, which is just a sort of throwaway nonsense gag where you see Eddie Griffin, he sort of does some martial arts fighting with sort of three goons, and then we see him throw one to the floor, and then we're meant to believe like is stamping down on his neck with his foot, and we can hear this horrible sort of crackling sound, which we assume he must be snapping the vertebrae of this guy's like neck, and then the camera cuts down and we just see that he's stamping on a packet of crisps, and the goon just says, I just bought those.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just so well played, but it's such a silly joke, but it's so well played that you can't help but laugh at it.
Yeah, and that's one of those jokes where, again, like it lands like an airplane joke, whereas the one when towards the end, spoilers, when Neil Patrick Harris's character literally rips hearts and spines out. It's funny at first, but then I feel like the more you watch it, the more it would kind of fall into that like middle school Chris Kattan type humor.
I mean, I'm assuming the joke of that particular scene is that we just don't expect that of Neil Patrick Harris. He's
right.
Is that the joke? Because I mean I know he is Doogie Howser, but I'm not aware of his other work, and I'm not aware of his wider perception within kind of popular culture.
Yeah, it's always been soft isn't the word, but he's always just been like real friendly and charming and charismatic, like goofy. He's never been a dark, spiteful, or any kind of like, there's been no negative connotation with him or the characters that he's portrayed. Even when he did like Count Olaf in A Series of Unfortunate Events, it's always been like kind of goofy and not really menacing. The only, I guess, the weirdest he's ever gotten, or the most, I can't think of the word, but he was in Gone Girl.
Yeah.
And he played a creepy kind of guy, and it didn't obviously work out for his character in the end. But for the overall, he tends to be a nicer kind of guy.
But I guess that was almost sort of like stunt casting, I guess, with his appearance then in Gone Girl, because he's playing completely against type, and I guess that heightens the sort of controlling and sinister aspects of the character that he was portraying in that particular movie. But
exactly, and even though he's like kind of a creep and stuff, like he's still a good person. Like he's still like one of the nicer people in that film. Like it's weird how that works.
So how do you think Undercover Brother stacks up against other genre spoof movies?
I think it's up there. The more I think about it, and especially with this rewatch, I think it might not be the upper echelons, but I would comfortably say it cracks the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would back you up on that, because I was, before we did this podcast, I had a sort of list of, had a look at the list of the highest sort of ranked spoof movies on IMDb, and I had a look through the sort of top 30, and I saw a lot of films on there, and I was thinking, you know what, that isn't that good, and this is actually funnier than them. And I would, I reckon I'd probably put this in the top 10, top 15 for sure, because things like Black Dynamite I think is a great film. Airplane, I do. I was a bit surprised actually that I don't know where. I might have to go back and have a look at that list, but I didn't see it in the top 30, and I think that's a bit of a, frankly, oversight given some of the other stuff that was getting listed there.
I think so, and I think, maybe I'm being really bold here, but we could see an Undercover Brother resurgence. There was actually an Undercover Brother 2 that came out last year, weirdly enough, starring Michael Jai White, who was the lead in Black Dynamite. And I saw that, I'm like, wait, what? And I almost watched that over Undercover Brother, but I was like, no, let me stick to the task at hand. But I'm genuinely interested to see what this movie is about.
I think we've finished the front 9 of this podcast, so before we start playing our way back to the clubhouse, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the exploding golf cart action.
In a world where podcasts already seem to address every imaginable subject, one man broke new ground with a seemingly random obsession about exploding helicopters in movies. He was a podcaster on the edge, a maverick broadcaster who played by his own rules. Now, he has a last chance to talk about the strange way helicopters explode in film. Exploding Helicopter, available on iTunes and Podomatic now. Think you know about chopper fireballs? Think again.
We're back, and now we're looking at the exploding golf cart action. This occurs during an undercover surveillance mission. Undercover brother and sister girl infiltrate the grounds of a golf course in disguise to follow up on a lead in their search for the man. When their undercover operation is exposed, they jump into a golf cart to try and make their escape. They're pursued by 2 security guards in another golf cart. To stop the chase, our hero UB throws some golf tees onto the ground. The pursuing golf cart punctures a tire when it runs over them. This sends the battery-powered vehicle crashing into a gas main. There's a momentary pause before there's a huge explosion. So, Nick, what did you make of the exploding golf cart action? Did it finish top of the leaderboard, or did it miss the cut for you?
Oh, it was absolutely top of the leaderboard. And what I liked most is, unlike most exploding golf carts where we get them towards the end of the film, they tend to be a big centerpiece. This was nice and early in the film. And it kind of got me excited for more of the action, more of the explosions later. Fortunately, that didn't happen explosion-wise, but at least we still got some action later on. But I really enjoyed it. It's been a long time since I've seen a race with golf carts, so that was fun. But the explosion was definitely the cherry on top.
Yeah, I enjoyed the lead up to the explosion myself. I thought, it's always good to see, 2 golf carts in a low speed pursuit, and you certainly get your money's worth of that in this particular movie. And I thought it was a nice touch to use the golf tees as a way of puncturing the tires of the pursuing vehicle. Ties it back into that golf course theme that we like so much. And there was a little a particular innovation that I appreciated with the explosion of the golf cart, was that after it crashes into the gas main, there's actually quite a sort of considerable pause before the whole vehicle explodes. And they say anticipation is half the pleasure, and I think that pause was really well judged, because it kind of gives you that sort of, okay, it's going to explode, surely it's going to explode, or maybe it isn't, and then it does. And, I thought that just heightened the pleasure of that particular moment.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, because as soon as they get in the golf carts, you already know what's going to happen. You already know an explosion is on the way. It's just a matter of when and where. And like you said, that buildup is there, then there's the beat, and then boom, it hits. It's almost like telling a good joke, where you got the setup, you wait a second, and punchline. It's all about timing, and they nailed it just right.
And it makes you wonder why, a lot more filmmakers who make these, golfing movies aren't exploiting the opportunities around exploding golf carts. I mean, Legend of Bagger Vance. I mean, there's only so much exploration of man's inner life and his purpose on this world that I want to see if there isn't an exploding golf cart at some point.
Absolutely. I mean, how Caddyshack, a massive golf comedy, never had anything golf cart related, be it a chase or an explosion. I mean, we're robbed. We're robbed of that, and there's no way they couldn't have slid that in there somewhere or made it a bigger part of the film like this one does.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a trope that filmmakers really need to spend a bit more time looking at and kind of really raise their game, because I just don't think that they're really, getting to grips with this particular kind of phenomena yet.
No, and it would make it that much more entertaining instead of, Tin Cup. Who wants to see Tin Cup? I don't want to see Tin Cup. I don't even like the fact that I'm talking about Tin Cup. But here we are, because there's nothing exciting pulling you into any of these other golf films.
Exactly. But, if a golf cart had blown up in it, I think you'd be a lot hotter on Tin Cup, that's for sure.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'd be all over Rene Russo and Kevin Costner, like in a drop of a hat, or in this case, in a drop of a golf tee.
Couldn't have put it better myself, Nick. Okay, I think it's time to sign our scorecards and head to the 19th hole. Nick, thanks for joining me on this episode of Exploding Golf Cart. Do you want to take a minute to do some shameless plugging?
Absolutely. FrenchToastSunday.com. As always, you can find myself there as well as the rest of the crew. Still have podcast episodes coming out. It's been very sporadic, but we're working on getting a more consistent schedule. Of course, the way things are, it might even become more sporadic. We shall see what happens. I think we're going to start doing some really interesting things over Skype that we hope to implement into the podcast and make things a little bit different, a little more exciting. So fingers crossed there. I'm on a couple of Lambcast episodes coming up, so keep your eyes out for those. But you can find me there, and definitely check us out.
Thanks a lot, Nick, and thanks very much for listening. For those of you who are, don't forget, sharing is caring. So if you could rate, review, or retweet, you'd really be helping us out. We'll be back soon, but until then, as always, keep watching the fairways for those exploding golf carts.
This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.